So today we're going to go gear shopping in our practice, and this is a favourite pastime of many musicians, especially guitarists and anyone who plays an electronic instrument. But gear shopping with me today is going to be totally free, so you don't have to spend any money, which is perfect if you are a broke musician like me. So I'm going to give you a shopping list for beginners and a shopping list for intermediate to advanced players. And I'll also give you 3 things that you can try in your practice today. And then there is a relaxation exercise at the end of the video if you want to stick around and just have a nice calm start to your music practice for the day. So the theme of this week is newness. This is video number 1. So this is all about finding new things for your music practice, new sounds, new textures, new ideas, new ways of thinking about practice, just new tools to add into your toolkit. The same way you would go out and shop for a bunch of new guitar pedals, but you don't have to spend any money for these particular tools. Start spark. Hello, welcome to Practice Space. I'm Erica. I am a musician, composer, and music teacher. And if you want to follow along with the podcast, you can subscribe for daily episodes so you always have something new to practice and some motivation to keep practicing your instrument or your voice every day. And you can also take some lessons with me if you like. I'll put a link in the description below. So if you're like me, you may have gone out and bought a new piece of musical equipment, a new guitar pedal, maybe you bought a whole new instrument, and you get home and you get really excited because you've got access to all these new colors. It's exciting, it's new, you're having fun playing around with it, you're really inspired to practice. Maybe you write something new, maybe you play your piece and it sounds amazing, but then what we find is that sometimes the sparkle wears off these things, and the problems that we were trying to solve by buying that new guitar pedal or buying that new instrument still exist. We're still not the player that we wanted to be. And so what we're looking for often when we buy these tools is we're looking for new colors, new textures. We're sometimes even just looking for something new, some freshness to our practice, something to experiment with, to pull us out of our familiar territory and make us think about music differently. And we can get all of this without spending any money. So if you're a beginner, this is my shopping list for you. And the first thing on my list is to borrow a phrase. So find a phrase from a song you love, or maybe a phrase from a concerto that you would like to learn to play one day. Just a very short phrase, maybe 2 bars is enough. And then try and imitate it as close as you can to the recording that you really love. So thinking about what are the colors, what are the textures, what are the dynamics, what is the feeling of this, and how can I play it like this other person. And so the second thing on my list is, I'm going to call it the dynamic brush. So you're going to add a dynamic brush to your toolkit, and you're going to take something that you've been playing, whether it's this phrase from the previous exercise or just a scale, some piece that you're working on, and try it at as many dynamic ranges as possible. So try it very softly, then try it very, very loud, then try it somewhere in between. And if you feel adventurous, you can try starting soft and crescendoing to very loud, or the other way, starting loud and then getting softer. And so the third thing is to use an app that I really like called Drum Genius. And this is free. I think you get 3 loops before you have to pay for any extra loops. So you're going to find one loop that sounds interesting, and you're going to press play, and then you're going to play something along to that loop. Maybe you just clap along to it. Maybe you just listen and kind of try and feel the rhythm in your body, because that's kind of, for me, rhythm is a body thing much more than like a cerebral mental thing. And maybe you play the phrase that you worked on in the first exercise. And if you picked a phrase from a concerto, it could be kind of fun to play that to a bossa nova beat. It could give you some really interesting insights into how you can play this phrase. But you can just play a single chord. You could sing a very simple scale. You could just sing 2 notes along to this rhythm. And so giving yourself just some new, interesting rhythmic material. And then if you like the app Drum Genius, you can explore some of the other rhythms as well. And so the final thing on my beginner shopping list is what I'm going to call the micro focus tool. So if we're thinking maybe something like Photoshop, we're going to zoom in really close to one tiny area of our playing, and you're going to set a timer for 5 minutes so that you don't get too bogged down in this micro focus. And you're going to really concentrate on that area for 5 minutes. This is a great practice tool to have in your practice toolkit for all time. And so the tiny area of focus could be as simple as one guitar chord and getting it to sound clean, so having no strings buzzing. So what do you have to do to get all of those strings to sound cleanly? Then taking your hand away and trying to find that position again where the chord is clean with no buzzing. You could also focus on intonation if that's an issue for your instrument. And so rather than thinking about the intonation of a whole 3-octave scale or getting the intonation of the piece you're working on perfect, just choose one tiny area, 1 bar, 2 bars. Maybe you just choose all the C's on your instrument and really micro focus on the intonation of each of those C's. So now I have my shopping list for more intermediate to advanced students, and you probably realize that the beginner shopping list is very applicable to intermediate to advanced players because we are all beginners at some part of our practice at all times. You know, we're always learning something new. But these are some things that maybe will give you a little bit of extra something in your practice today. So the first thing on my shopping list is the extreme register brush, if we think of it in the idea of like a painter's toolkit. So this is taking things that maybe are familiar, like an exercise or a phrase, and experimenting in the most extreme register of your instrument, so the very, very lows and the very, very highs, and trying to remove the sense that it has to sound good and perfect, because these are hard places to play sometimes in the extreme registers of our instrument. But there are lots of colors and textures that we get access to that maybe are not conventionally beautiful sounds, but they could be a really nice tool to add into your playing at just the right time. And if you know how to make that sound, then you can file it away in your toolbox and you can take that brush out, that exact brush that gives you that kind of like squeaky, scratchy sound exactly when you need it. And it could be the most beautiful moment in the piece that you're playing. And so the second thing on my shopping list is the constraint brush. So you're going to take one technique or one tool and you're going to play maybe your whole practice session if you're feeling ambitious, or just your exercises or a piece using that constraint. So that constraint could be that you play everything pizzicato. And if you are the kind of person who avoids pizzicato practice like me, it could be very helpful to spend a whole practice session playing everything pizzicato. Even the things that you would normally play arco, you play them pizzicato. If you are a drummer, you could decide that you're only going to use one particular kind of stick or one particular kind of brush, or you're going to play everything on one drum. That's your constraint. So sometimes when we give ourselves these really tiny constraints, it frees us up to do really wonderful creative things within this constraint, because we have simplified our choices, and so we have to we only have this one thing. So what sounds can we get out of this one technique or this one part of our music kit? And so the next thing on my shopping list is to think about the idea of texture and silence. And this is maybe taking a familiar piece and trying to play it in a different texture to the way that you think it should be played. And so if this is a really grandiose piece, maybe you try and play it with a very soft, airy texture. And then also using silence as a way of, I guess, punctuating the texture. So where is the silence and how can you change the silence? How much silence is too much silence? How much silence is not enough silence? How much silence before the notes all get glued together? And so this idea of texture and silence is just a way of rethinking familiar music and maybe giving yourself some new colors, the way that you would get a new color if you bought a new guitar pedal that did something fun and you played around with it for half an hour. We're like, ooh, this is a good sound, but then you got bored with it after a while. So we can do the same thing. We don't have to spend any money on a guitar pedal. We can find these textures on our instruments just by ourselves. And then the last thing on my shopping list is the same as the beginner exercise, to borrow a phrase. But instead of borrowing the phrase and trying to imitate it exactly, you're going to try and change it in some way. Whether this is changing the rhythm, changing the melody, and if this sounds like improvising and you are getting scared, then that's okay. It's practice. You're allowed to be doing things that don't sound good in practice, that you're not good at yet. That's why you're practicing them. And so it could be as simple as just playing something at a totally different speed than what it's meant to be played at. So if something is meant to be played really fast, what does it sound like if you play it as if it was a beautiful, lush rubato ballad, this super fast line? If you're feeling more adventurous, you could take the phrase and then you could maybe improvise a response. So you have a call and then you answer it with a phrase of your own. Or you could change the rhythms, you could change the harmony, you could just find some way of transforming this musical cell into something else. And so these are my tools for you today. And if you want 3 things that you can do today, I'll give you 3 things in case you just don't want to make a decision. So the first one is to borrow a phrase, whether it's the simple version just to try and imitate it exactly, or the adventurous version to change it in some way. The second one is to play with the idea of dynamics and think about how can you play this one small thing with as many dynamic possibilities. And then the third one is to take some sort of a constraint. So whether it is a technical constraint, if it's maybe playing everything in a particular part of your instrument, playing everything only just with one kind of stick or on one drum, and doing it for just the exercises or for your whole practice session today. And so I have one final bonus exercise if you feel like you really want to stretch yourself, and this is to look at your own playing and find one color that is missing. So one color that you feel like you are missing from your playing, and you can probably find it by thinking about what you avoid practicing, what you feel like you're not good at, what you feel like it's not sounding great yet. And then thinking, this is the color that I need to add to my toolkit, and then working out how do you go about adding that in. Maybe it is playing fast. Maybe you struggle with playing fast, but that kind of fast, ferocious energy is a color that is missing from your playing and you want to add it in. You feel like your palette is missing that bit up there. So this is the day to start working on it. Work on playing fast. Work on just a little small something and get the tempo up until you're feeling that fast, ferocious energy. And you can use the egg timer trick just for 5 minutes and then turn it off and say, okay, that's my fast practice done for today, and revisit it again the next day. And of course, like everything in practice, the more you practice, the easier it gets. So let's just take some time to prepare the body and the mind for practice. Take out your instrument, books, music, whatever you need for your practice today, and then spend a few moments making the space comfortable. And when you're ready, coming to a place of stillness, you can stand or sit with your instrument, and then with the next exhale, gently closing the eyes. Bring your awareness to your breath. Notice where in the body you feel that breath moving. The nose, the throat, chest, diaphragm. Where you feel the rise of each inhale and the fall of each exhale. And now you can begin to count each breath. 1 with the inhale, 2 with the exhale, 3 inhale, 4 exhale. Just up to a count of 10, then returning back to 1 again. And if any thoughts appear in the mind, simply noting, thinking, or any feelings, noting, feeling, and bringing the attention back to the breath. If you find you're distracted, simply returning to the count of 1, back to 10, and then repeat back at 1. So now slowly bringing your awareness back to the body, feeling the weight of your body in the chair, or the feeling of the feet connected to the floor. Maybe the feeling of your instrument under your fingers, its texture. And then, when you're ready, you can blink the eyes open, and I wish you a wonderful day's practice.